Late August 1944, 06:15 hours, Observation Post 4, Pargny, France. The morning report lay crumpled on the desk as the German technical officers of Flak Regiment 155W struggled to comprehend the calculations before them. The interception rates violated every principle of ballistic probability taught in Luftwaffe technical schools across the Reich. 82% destroyed. This cannot be correct. Through their field telescopes, German observers had watched something that contradicted everything their intelligence services claimed about Allied anti-aircraft capabilities. The V-1 flying bombs, launched toward London before dawn, were being destroyed at rates that defied all logic. They weren't being intercepted by fighters forced into dangerous pursuit curves. They weren't snagging on barrage balloon cables. They were being destroyed by anti-aircraft fire over the coastal gun belt, shells detonating with impossible precision around the missiles, somehow exploding near them rather than requiring direct hits. At the headquarters of Flak Regiment 155W in the Chateau d'Eau, Oberst Max Wachtel, commander of the entire V-1 offensive, received these reports with growing alarm. Over the course of the V-1 campaign, the proportion of flying bombs destroyed by coastal guns had risen from 17% in June to 74% by late August, hitting an astonishing 82% during one extraordinary day in the final week of August 1944. It marked the beginning of the most profound technological shock German weapons scientists would face in the entire war. What neither Wachtel nor any German scientist knew was that they were witnessing the deployment of one of World War II's most closely guarded secrets, a technology protected at a classification level equal to the atomic bomb project. The proximity-fuze, or VT fuse in Allied code, was systematically destroying Hitler's terror weapon with a precision German physics insisted was impossible. The story began 10 weeks earlier, on June 13, 1944, exactly 1 week after D-Day. In response to the Allied invasion of Normandy, Hitler unleashed his long-promised Vergeltungswaffe, the vengeance weapon, against London. At 4:25 a.m. on June 13th, the first V-1 struck the city, landing on Grove Road in Bow, destroying a railway bridge and nearby homes. 6 people were killed, 30 injured, and 200 left homeless. The weapon represented years of German development, a pilotless aircraft powered by an Argus AS-109.014 pulse jet engine, carrying 850 kilograms of amytal at 640 kilometers per hour. It was the world's first operational cruise missile, and German High Command believed it would bring Britain to the brink of collapse. Major Walter Dornberger, head of the V-weapons program at Peenemünde, had calculated that even a conservative 25% success rate would deliver more explosive power to London than the entire Blitz of 1940 to 41. Each V-1 cost roughly 5,000 Reichsmarks to produce, far cheaper than a manned bomber sortie and with no risk to air crews. At Peenemünde, German scientists were confident. They had pioneered advanced rocket technologies, deployed operational jet aircraft, and now fielded the first cruise missile. Dr. Robert Lusser, designer of the V-1's control system, calculated that Allied interception was nearly impossible. The flying bomb traveled at 640 kilometers per hour at altitudes between 600 and 2,700 meters. British fighters needed speeds exceeding 650 kilometers per hour just to intercept it. To destroy one, they had to close to within 200 meters. Any closer risked being killed by the explosion. As for anti-aircraft fire, the probability of a direct hit on such a small, fast target was calculated at less than 1 in 10,000 shells fired. This wasn't propaganda, it was solid ballistic science. Conventional timed fuses required accurate tracking, precise calculations, and manual fuse setting and perfect timing. With the V-1 speed, gunners had perhaps 30 seconds from detection to engagement. Oberst Max Wachtel, commanding Flak Regiment 155W, understood these limitations from years on both sides of anti-aircraft warfare. During the campaign, the Germans would launch 9,521 V-1 missiles from ground sites against England, with thousands more targeting other locations, bringing the total to roughly 25,000 V-1s deployed during the war. But within days of the first launches, troubling reports began reaching German intelligence. British anti-aircraft defenses were adapting with suspicious speed. By late June, interception rates had risen from 10% to 24%, higher than predicted, but still explainable. Then came July, and the numbers became impossible to rationalize. German technical officers noticed British gunners claiming V-1 kills with astonishingly low ammunition expenditure. Observers on the French coast watched V-1s flying steadily toward London, suddenly surrounded by flak bursts, then tumbling from the sky, despite explosions appearing too far away to be direct hits. Unknown to German intelligence, they were witnessing the effects of proximity fuses, devices that transformed near misses into lethal blasts. The technology had already been operational in the Pacific since January 1943, when USS Helena shot down a Japanese dive bomber with shells that detonated by sensing proximity to the target. German intelligence had missed the truth completely. The Oslo report of November 1939 had mentioned research into proximity fuses, but German scientists dismissed the claim as deliberate misinformation. Germany itself had attempted to create similar technology. More than 30 separate designs were explored, yet none ever reached operational readiness. German engineers had concluded that proximity fuses were simply impossible to build. The technical obstacles appeared overwhelming. Miniaturizing radio transmitter receivers small enough to fit inside artillery shells, designing vacuum tubes capable of surviving 20,000 Gs of acceleration, creating batteries that could remain inert for years and then activate on command, and achieving the level of precision manufacturing needed for mass production. And yet, by August 1944, American factories were turning out 40,000 proximity fuses every single day. In the final week of August 1944, the proximity fuse reached its peak effectiveness. The British had reorganized their entire anti-aircraft defense network. Their guns were now guided by American SCR-584 radar units that provided fully automatic tracking. More importantly, the guns were firing shells equipped with VT fuses specifically modified to counter the V-1 threat. The Royal Artillery and the RAF Regiment relocated from the North Downs to concentrated positions along the south coast, forming a dense defensive gun belt. This relocation ensured that any unexploded shells fell into the sea, where they could not be recovered by Germany. When a V-1 crossed the British coastline, it entered a kill zone where technology overpowered mathematics. The SCR-584 radar locked on to each missile, calculated its course, and fed firing solutions directly to the guns. Inside each proximity fuse were miniature radio transmitter receivers built with vacuum tubes engineered by Sylvania Electric and Western Electric. When the returning signal indicated that the shell was close to a V-1, Firetron switches triggered the detonator, blasting steel fragments through the missile's thin skin. On the peak day that August, coastal guns shot down 82% of the incoming V-1s, a level of effectiveness German engineers regarded as physically impossible. The reports of 82% interception rates sparked emergency meetings within the German High Command. Oberst Wachtel suspected sabotage, but inspections confirmed that the missiles were functioning normally. Test launches over German territory showed no defects. The problem occurred only when V-1s entered British airspace.
German analysts concluded that Britain had developed some revolutionary new anti-aircraft system, but they could not determine its nature without capturing intact examples. The Germans tried everything, adjusting flight paths, changing altitudes, launching larger salvos, flying at night, exploiting weather. None of it worked. The destruction rate remained catastrophic. At Peenemünde, scientists were forced to confront an alarming possibility. If the Allies had developed proximity fuses, then they had accomplished what Germany believed to be impossible. German attempts to uncover the secret intensified, but failed utterly. Security around the proximity fuse program was nearly flawless. Production was spread across 110 factories, each compartmentalized so that workers knew only their specific tasks. Even the Allied name variable time fuse was intentionally misleading, designed to sound like a conventional timed fuse instead of a proximity device. By 1944, a significant portion of American electronics manufacturing capacity had been diverted entirely to proximity fuse production. At peak output, American factories produced 40,000 fuses per day. Costs dropped from $732 per unit in 1942 to just $18 by 1945. Crossley, previously a radio and refrigerator manufacturer, employed 10,000 workers and produced 16,000 fuses daily at peak. Sylvania Electric dedicated its vacuum tube research division entirely to developing ruggedized miniature tubes, producing 400,000 per day. 95% of every tube produced went into proximity fuses. The contrast between the two countries was total. Germany handcrafted weapons in small batches. America mass-produced an entirely new technological class of weapon at unprecedented scale. Monthly U.S. proximity fuse production surpassed the total number of V-1s Germany built during the entire war. The engineering behind the proximity fuse was extraordinary. Each device had to withstand the immense shock of being fired from a gun, 20,000 Gs of acceleration, rotational speeds of 25,000 RPM, and harsh temperature fluctuations. Sylvania developed miniature vacuum tubes originally inspired by hearing aid electronics, but reinforced to survive these extreme conditions. The batteries were designed to remain inert for years, yet activate instantly when the shell was fired. Inside the fuse was a miniature radio system transmitting continuously. When reflections indicated proximity to a solid object, the circuitry triggered detonation. Achieving this simplicity in principle required solving engineering problems German experts had judged unsolvable. Quality control was unparalleled. Every fuse underwent multiple levels of testing, and random samples were actually fired to ensure reliability. Rejection rates remained below 2%, an astonishing level of precision at such high production numbers. By September 1944, the V-1 campaign was effectively defeated. Of the 9,521 V-1s launched from ground sites towards Britain, only 2,515 reached London. They killed 6,184 civilians and wounded 17,981. A tragedy, but a fraction of what Germany had intended. General Frederick Pyle, commander of British Anti-Aircraft Command, estimated that casualties would have been 4 to 5 times higher without proximity fuses. The proximity fuse saved London from devastation. Germany shifted to night launches and turned to the V-2 rocket, whose supersonic speed made interception impossible. But these desperate measures failed to achieve any strategic leverage. The V-1 became an expensive failure, draining resources that Germany badly needed elsewhere. Germany's inability to detect or understand the proximity fuse remains one of history's most severe intelligence failures. Despite extensive networks and high technical skill, German analysts never understood the nature of the weapon that was destroying their missiles. The program remained secret throughout the war. Not a single intact proximity fuse fell into German hands during the V-1 campaign. Even during the Battle of the Bulge, when German forces captured an American ammunition dump containing proximity-fuse shells, they never realized what they were looking at.
The Germans' conviction that such devices were impossible prevented them from recognizing the evidence they already possessed. After Germany's surrender, interrogations revealed that the German scientific community had absolutely no understanding of proximity fuses. Oberst Max Wachtel told Allied officers that they had suspected Britain might be using better radar or improved rapid-setting time fuses, but they had never imagined a shell capable of sensing its own target. German scientists who were shown captured American VT fuses reacted with disbelief. They could not accept that vacuum tubes had survived the acceleration of gunfire, that batteries could remain viable after years of storage, or that such circuitry could function after being blasted from an anti-aircraft gun. They estimated that Germany was at least 10 years behind the United States in this field. Dr. Merle Tuve, who led the proximity fuse development at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, later reflected that the program succeeded because scientists, engineers, and factory workers collaborated systematically, something authoritarian systems could not replicate. The proximity fuse demonstrated that World War II was decided as much in laboratories and factories as on the battlefield. While Germany chased exotic miracle weapons, the United States invested in technologies that multiply the effectiveness of existing weapons. The proximity fuse increased the effectiveness of every anti-aircraft gun by a factor of 5 to 10 times. Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal remarked, "The proximity fuse has helped blaze the trail to Japan. Without the protection this ingenious device has given our fleet surface ships, our westward advance would not have been so rapid, and the losses in men and ships would have been immeasurably higher." The V-1 program relied heavily on forced labor. Tens of thousands of concentration camp prisoners died in the underground facilities that built the missiles. Meanwhile, American workers voluntarily put in long hours for good wages, often unaware of what they were making, but fully aware that it mattered. At Sylvania's plant in Ipswich, over 5,000 women worked 12-hour shifts manufacturing specialized components. Only after the war did they discover that they had helped protect London from Hitler's terror weapons. The secret of the proximity fuse held completely firm. Even British anti-aircraft crews did not know what made their ammunition so effective. They simply received special shells with strict accounting rules. Every proximity-fused round fired at a V-1 was recorded. Any unexploded shell was secured immediately. Naval vessels patrolled the English Channel specifically to prevent the Germans from recovering dud rounds. This absolute secrecy came at a heavy cost. Allied ground forces were forbidden to use proximity-fused artillery until December 1944. Thousands of soldiers died because the technology was considered too valuable to risk falling into enemy hands. But using it against the V-1s was viewed as essential. The survival of London during the invasion period was critical. For Germany, the V-1 program consumed immense resources while providing almost no strategic benefit. The roughly 25,000 V-1s launched during the war cost millions of Reichsmarks and diverted manpower and material from desperately needed fighter aircraft and anti-tank weapons. The use of slave labor added a moral weight to its failure. Proximity fuses were defeating weapons built at the price of human suffering, a contrast fully appreciated only after the war. The proximity fuse marked a transformation in warfare. It represented victory through engineering, production, and system-wide efficiency, rather than through individual superweapons. It proved that modern conflict was ultimately a contest of industrial systems rather than mere military units. Before saving American ships in the Pacific and contributing to Japan's defeat, the proximity fuse had saved London. The German personnel watching V-1s fall from the sky never understood why.
The technology that defeated them was unimaginable within their scientific worldview. The shift was dramatic. Before proximity fuses, shooting down a single V-1 required an average of 2,500 heavy anti-aircraft shells. With proximity fuses, the number dropped to around 100. The coastal gun belt's interception rate jumped from 17% to 82% in just 10 weeks. This success had nothing to do with bravery or training. It came from producing advanced technology on a scale Germany could not conceive of or match. The United States had mobilized nearly its entire electronics industry, employing more than 80,000 workers and spending over $1 billion to produce 22 million fuses. The proximity fuse was declassified in September 1945. The War Department's announcement began with the words, "One of the most important weapons developed during the war, surpassed in effectiveness only by the atomic bomb." For German scientists who had struggled to explain the V-1 failures, the truth brought clarity and humiliation. They realized they had not been defeated by strategy or battlefield skill, but by an industrial capacity they never imagined. Post-war interviews revealed their astonishment. They had believed the V-1 was the pinnacle of weapon development. Learning that it had been countered by inexpensive, mass-produced electronic devices costing under $20 was devastating. They had lost not to superior soldiers, but to assembly lines. Proximity fuse technology went on to shape modern air defense systems, radar altimeters, and electronic warfare tools. For the former German weapon designers, it remained a lasting symbol of their wartime blind spots. The proximity fuse proved that in modern war, producing good technology in massive quantities matters more than creating a few extraordinary weapons. Germany built ingenious but limited run designs. America built effective systems by the millions. On that remarkable day in late August 1944, when proximity-fused shells destroyed 82% of all incoming V-1s, the very nature of warfare shifted. The German personnel launching their vengeance weapons never understood what invisible technology was destroying them. They had done everything correctly within their own framework, developed advanced weapons, trained specialist crews, and pushed scientific boundaries. Yet they were defeated by mass-produced electronics beyond their imagination. The proximity fuse saved London through thousands of precisely timed detonations, each made possible by technology German scientists believed could not exist. It became a triumph of industrial democracy over authoritarian engineering, of mass production over handcrafted perfection, of simple, scalable solutions over complex wonder weapons. The Germans never understood what was bringing their V-1s down in flames. They were beaten by a secret they could not conceive, and by an industrial power they could never equal. In the end, the proximity fuse turned Hitler's vengeance weapon into London's salvation. The Germans never understood how or why until long after it no longer mattered. The 82% interception rate achieved in late August 1944 became lasting proof that in modern warfare, industrial strength can defeat any wonder weapon, no matter how advanced. The proximity fuse was more than a single innovation. It demonstrated that a democracy capable of mobilizing science and industry could overcome a tyranny relying on forced labor and isolated brilliance. And as the Germans watched their supposedly perfect weapons fall from the sky, they never realized they were witnessing proof that the war had already been lost.